Good afternoon and welcome to today's post-cabinet press conference. Today I have with me the Minister of National Security, Mr. Edmund Dillon, and Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister and Minister in the Office of the Attorney General, Mr. Stuart Young, and we started with Minister Dillon making a few announcements.
A pleasant good afternoon to members of the media and the listening public of Trinidad and Tobago. I want to bring to your attention two issues this morning. The first one I want to comment on is an article that appeared in today's Express, page 4, written by J.C. Gonzalez, in which I saw the leader of the opposition almost politicizing crime. And I feel that this crime situation in Trinidad and Tobago is one in which is at a stage right now where we cannot afford to be politicizing crime at this point in time. We need to be conscious of the fact that crime affects each and every one of us, all the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, and therefore there must be a concerted effort. I looked at the article and in fact she mentioned, in fact it was quoted, that what is required right now is a meeting of the National Security Council. And I want to say that the leader of the opposition does not control the meetings of the National Security Council. On the Saturday, the 14th of May 2016, when the Honourable Prime Minister returned to Trinidad and Tobago, as is customary, the Minister of National Security would give him a brief, an update with respect to the security situation in Trinidad and Tobago, and that was done. Further information was provided to the Honourable Prime Minister on Monday the 16th, as a result of which the Honourable Prime Minister called a meeting of the National Security Council, which was held on Tuesday the 17th. That meeting lasted for about 4 hours, during which time the council itself was updated with respect to the security situation in Trinidad and Tobago, in particular, the crime situation. There was also a presentation by an operational head who presented to the council issues pertinent to and an operational framework to treat with the crime situation in Trinidad and Tobago. I cannot go into those details, but of course, I'll let you know that coming out of that meeting, certain different strategies were in fact created and will be evolving over time. Now, it's important to note also that I have met with the divisional heads. There are 9 police divisions in Trinidad and Tobago. I met with them, and what is more important out of that meeting is in fact empowering the divisional heads to take control of the 9 divisions. What we have realized for a large extent is that divisional heads, while they are the heads of the division, they must be able to treat that real estate. So I'm empowering them and making them accountable for the 9 divisions that they're in charge of throughout Trinidad and Tobago. And I believe by so doing, making them accountable, they can treat with every single situation. They must know, in other words, they must know, they must map out their territories. They must know who are the perpetrators, who are the individuals in their territory, who are the good guys, who are the bad guys. And on top of that, we have now incorporated our fusion center, our intelligence fusion center, through the National Strategic Services Agency, and coordinating intelligence from the various intelligence gathering agencies through that fusion center that makes intelligence and the operational intelligence that will now be fed back into these divisions. So there will be a coordinated and integrated approach with respect to treating with the situations. You would, of course, realize that coming out of that meeting, we had several operations throughout Trinidad and Tobago, in the Marabella Bayshore area, in the Enterprise area, in the southwestern area, over the last couple of days. We have had subsequent seizure of weapons and, of course, narcotics over those periods. Roughly about 93 persons were arrested. One of the areas that we are also going to be targeting, and we have already started doing so, is targeting who we consider to be based again on intelligence and within the legal framework, who we consider to be known perpetrators. We all have heard from time to time that we know who they are. And so the divisional commanders have been instructed to ensure that, again, based on the legal framework, that we go outside there and ensure that those people who are bent on making crime and criminality a problem in our society cannot be afforded to live a normal life. And I use the word normal. In other words, they should be, I don't want to use the word harass, but they should be integrated in such a way that they are brought in for questioning, as the case may be, or arrested if there is sufficient evidence. But we must be able to ensure that the less than 2% of our society cannot and will not hold our country to ransom. So the divisional commanders through the Commissioner of Police has been so instructed. Again, I want to emphasize that this is not a time to play politics with crime. This is definitely not a time. It's a time in our country's history where we need to be conscious that crime affects us all. And so there must be a concerted effort on almost every citizen to be part and parcel of this fight against crime. I just want to share some statistics with you. And that is, we have done a bit of research looking at the type of murders and some of the areas. And the breakdown so far tells us that 8 of the murders so far are based on altercations. 9 are based on domestic violence. 54 based on gang-related violence. 29 based on revenge or reprisal killings. 15 based on robbery. 35 are drug-related. And so far, 28 are unknown and still being investigated. And while the murder rate today is roughly about 170, it is not something that this government is comfortable about. And so we want to assure the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago that we are putting all the resources that's required to treat with the people, the system, and processes to bring this country back to a secure environment. Thank you.
Minister Young.
Good afternoon, members of the media, listening community on the wider Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much for being here with us this afternoon. I am here predominantly to address one cabinet decision and to make a general announcement this afternoon. I'll start with the cabinet decision. The cabinet today took a decision with respect to the composition of the board of directors of FCB, First Citizens Bank. There are a number of directors whose term is coming to an end on the 17th of June 2016. And as a result, the cabinet has today taken a decision to reappoint Mr. Anthony Smart as the chairman, Mr. Courtney Williams, also a reappointment as the deputy chairman, and as 4 new appointees, Mr. Indris Omadine, Mr. Troy Garcia, Mr. Samuel Henry, and Ms. Giselle McFarlane. As you all are aware, this is a state bank with a private shareholding of about 20%. So this will be the composition of the board going forward in addition to the remaining members from the 16th of June this year. The second announcement is to let the population of Trinidad and Tobago know that on Monday, the 23rd of May, 2016, which is this coming Monday, the President of Venezuela, His Excellency Nicolas Maduro, will be making a visit to Trinidad and Tobago. President Maduro will be accompanied by His Excellency Delcy Rodriguez, the Minister of the People's Power for Foreign Affairs, Excellency Elugio Del Pino, Minister of the People's Power for Petroleum and Mining, and His Excellency Miguel Perez Abad, Minister of the People's Power for Industry and Commerce. There will also be on the official delegation from Venezuela representatives of the National Gas Company of Venezuela. And this is a visit that is being conducted at this time to enhance bilateral cooperation between our two countries in the areas of foreign policy, energy, and trade, amongst others, and to take stock of the progress that has been made since our delegation went across to Venezuela on the 26th of October 2015. So on Monday coming, that's Monday the 23rd of May, the President of Venezuela and an official delegation will be paying a visit to Trinidad and Tobago and will be met by our Honourable Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, and his official delegation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Young. We now take your questions.
What's going to be the duration of the Venezuelan president's visit?
At this stage is scheduled for throughout that day. So it'll be for a few hours during the day. We expect it to last at maximum just on Monday.
Minister Dillon, could you give us, you talked about empowering the divisional heads in the 9 districts. What kind of resources would be given to them to help them to do the tasks that you say that you would like to see them do? And does any of that include supplementing their manpower with members of the Defense Force?
Thank you for that question. Yes, they will be given assistance, one, in terms of providing the necessary intelligence to to put into operation, but additionally, it is in fact joint operations throughout. The defense force would be part and parcel of the operations, not only with the soldiers on land, but we also have the Coast Guard, especially right now with a presence in the maritime security environment. They're in fact along the Gulf of Paria and the north and the east of Trinidad and Tobago as we speak. But there's also what we call a coordinated approach. What we have also instituted is a coastal patrol, joint coastal patrol on land between the defense force and the police. In some of our remote areas or rural areas, such as Icacas, Cedros, Moruga, and in the north coast to some extent. So we have instituted a rural coastal patrols, and that is in combination with the Coast Guard on the seas. With the reason for that is to stem the flow of illegal drugs and guns coming into Trinidad and Tobago. So we have the maritime side, but we also have the land-based element working together as an integrated approach.
Minister, actually glad you brought up the Coast Guard element, because as you are fully aware, you all received, the National Security Ministry received some assets under the last government.
That's right.
And some of those vessels, will see them sometimes parked outside the Parliament building with no guns or anything on them. So what is the status of those assets that were obtained recently, and are they in your view effective to maintain the type of border security we're looking at?
The assets that we inherited, the Damien vessels, are in fact being utilized within the maritime security environment. And you were saying they don't have guns. I don't think you look carefully enough, because there are guns on board those vessels. So we may have to take a careful look, or probably I'll take you on a tour. But there are guns on those vessels, and they are outside, they're patrolling the waters of Trinidad and Tobago. Within recent time, we have had cause to have a vessel, specifically in the southwestern peninsula. And you would have seen seizure, about 1.5 million worth of seizure about 2 weeks ago. That was done by one of the vessels intercepting, coming out from the South American mainland. So they are outside, they're patrolling our waters, and we are using the vessels. This government has taken a decision, unlike the previous administration, notwithstanding we inherited the vessels, we are going to put them to use, because we have to treat the maritime security environment, and we are doing that.
Well, that also kind of dovetails into, and it's coincidental that you're having the President of Venezuela coming as well, and fully aware of what's happening over there.
That's correct.
And there have been concerns about, given the state of
Venezuela,
that we could see a greater influx, either possibly even more illegal Venezuelans coming through from there to here. So what is being now addressed on that front?
and this is something that we're very much conscious of. We have to, and we continue to monitor the situation in Venezuela. Because of our proximity to Venezuela, worst case scenario would suggest us that there could be, if everything goes on a worst case scenario in Venezuela, we definitely would have implications for Trinidad and Tobago. And so we have stemmed up, we have increased our patrol presence through the Gulf of Paria. But part of the discussion is that we had opened a bilateral agreement with Venezuela, security, earlier on last year, late last year as a matter of fact. And we continue to raise at my level, and the Minister of the Interior, continue to have ongoing discussion with him. Additionally, we are being kept abreast of the situation through our embassy and the military liaison officer who's based in Venezuela. So on a daily basis, I get a report from the military liaison officer as to the situation in Venezuela. So we continue to monitor and prepare.
Minister Dillon, just to go back to the issue of the Defense Force and the Joint Army Patrols, at a previous post-cabinet briefing, you suggested that those joint efforts would be moved into other hotspot communities.
That's correct.
Across the country. Can you give an update? How soon may we see some of those efforts in Enterprise, for example, and others?
You will see, I would not give you an update in terms of time, but I can tell you that that is being done. With Monday, the exercise on Monday was in fact a joint operation between the Army and the police in Enterprise in Bayshore. As to a similar operation as we did in Sogrim Trace, where you actually stationed there, that is being planned right now. And I don't want to say where they're going, but we'll definitely be going in certain areas based on intelligence within Trinidad and Tobago. And it will be a joint exercise between the Defense Force and the police.
On the issue of politicizing crime, is it fair to say that, and I ask that in the context that not just the opposition is raising concern about the recent spike in crime that we've seen over the last couple of weeks, I think last weekend in particular, there's a general concern that what is happening is just unacceptable, and they're not hearing the kind of responses that they need to hear from the government on this issue.
Well, when I raised the question of politicizing crime, is the remark that was quoted on the expert, and I said, you can't at this stage use political remarks as far as crime is concerned. Let's come with solutions. Let's come with ideas. And so with respect to the government, our strategy right now in terms of the national security strategy is based on, anchored in 4 elements. One, with respect to prediction, Prediction gives us the intelligence aspect of that strategy. Deterrence, and deterrence has both a presence but also an offensive posture. In other words, an operational posture of deterrence. The other one is detection, and the other one is prosecution. So that along those elements, the various divisional commanders will then take those strategies and anchor them in the various decisions. So deterrence, for instance, is not only in terms of the operation, but in terms of our presence along the road, along our highways, within our inner cities. A presence there that would give citizens a sense of security, that the defense force and the police are there, so you can visually see them, but also a deterrent in terms of those who are bent on committing crimes. Prediction is based on intelligence gathering, and that forms a very important part in terms of as we go forward treating operations. And of course, detection speaks for itself. Detection rate, as we're well aware, is very low right now, and so we have to increase our detection rate through institutional strengthening, through capacity building. And so that's an area that we, of course, must develop going forward, and we continue to do so by training and developing more crime scene investigators and so on. And of course, prosecution at the end of the day.
If I may join Minister Dillon on that answer, and you raise a very interesting point, which is citizens are concerned about crime. This government, likewise, is extremely concerned about crime, and I think people need to remember what a government can do. We're here as facilitators, lawmakers, making sure the Defense Force, Police Service, etc. are properly manned and resourced. You would see that the legislation and the changes we've been making, citizens need to be aware of it. We try to simplify. We've put in place a way of simplifying the appointment of a commissioner of police. You now have an opposition that has challenged that in the court frontally. A member of parliament from the opposition sent a pre-action letter, but when it came time to filing the claim in court, did not file the claim, but they got someone else. Why is the opposition standing in the way of a simplification of a process of appointing a commissioner of police? We just came through the passage of a very simple amendment for our intelligence services, the SSA bill. We saw how the opposition politicized that, misrepresented to the population, and tried to mislead the population down a road. That is another initiative that can be taken by a government with respect to the fight against crime. So the population and right-thinking citizens must observe what is going on, and as this government strives forward in our fight against crime, join with us to make sure we are a society that is taking the fight to crime to the criminals and not being obstructed by destructive behavior of the opposition.
Minister Dillon, my colleague Clint had asked, but I'm not sure that we got a definitive answer in terms of, can you clarify what you mean when you say empowering? Because it sounds as though they were hamstrung in some way to not have taken the kind of action that you're requiring of them now. And similarly, how are they being held accountable now as compared to what may have obtained in the past?
What we have seen happening over the last couple of months and so on is that situations are occurring in various divisions, and yet the response is coming from the police commissioner. The divisional commanders are nowhere in part of that response, even publicly. And so my instructions and my discussion with them is that they must take charge of their real estate. They must take charge of their divisions. They must own up to their divisions. They must know exactly what is happening in their divisions, to the extent where, now if you put the 9 divisions together and each divisional commander understands and knows everyone who's need to know in those divisions, then you see the benefit for the whole. What has been happening over time is that you have not heard or seen the voice of divisional commanders for situations to happen. For example, if something happens in Southwestern or in Northern, the divisional commander is not the one that's the focal point, and it should be. The divisional commander should be the focal point of that, especially the preliminary investigation, the mouth, the ears, the voice of that division. And so that empowerment has to do with they owning up to that real estate and being held accountable through the police commissioner, of course, because he is the line manager for the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, being held accountable for everything that takes place within their division. So it's a question of having a sort of a bolder presence and owning up as the owners of those divisions. And that has not been forthcoming, that has not been forthright. So that's the trust.
So is it that visibility would not only extend to being visible within their communities, but also, for example, accessible to the media, putting a public face on answering for crimes in their division at the police press briefing, etc.?
Definitely, and that's what you've hit the nail on the head there. So if something should happen, the person should be briefing you. Something happens in Southwestern, should be the Southwestern Divisional Commander or the Northern Divisional Commander. He or she is on the ground, and they should have pertinent knowledge of what takes place within the various divisions. Of course, there are national issues which you want to talk to the Commissioner of Police with or the Minister of National Security, but they must know, they must be aware of what's happening in their real estate.
You mentioned, if I heard the numbers correctly, that gang-related seems to be the top probable cause so far for the year in terms of murders. Given that that is not a new trend,
Right.
What is being done to tackle that that's different from anything else which has been done in the past?
Right. Again, based on the statistics, as you see, gangs, what is being done right now is a more intelligence-led approach to get into the gangs and understand them and be able to treat with that operationally. Because what has been happening in the past is that while we could identify some gangs, and the gangs in Trinidad and Tobago are not as structured as gangs internationally because people move from one gang to the next, as the case may be. But what is required to treat with gang violence is, in fact, a very severe and in-depth intelligence approach to treat with the gangs. And that's the difference that we're doing right now, getting the respective intelligence and making them operational.
Minister Dillon, the various arms of the protective services would have what they consider to be burning issues. And certainly, we can separate them. But what has been Cabinet's discussions on these issues that you probably want to have resolved? The fire services, for example, will claim that they have, particular issues. The prison services not too long ago, acted up in the context of safety and security, of course.
Right. The issues pertinent to the institution of national security are being addressed, both from a financial standpoint and from a social standpoint. They're being addressed right now. Most of the issues, as you're aware, I had several meetings with the association, the Fire Service Association, the Prison Service Association, where they raised certain issues, and those are being addressed.
In terms of Minister Stuart Young, you speak to a campaign for finance reform, and there's an ongoing discussion
There is.
on this issue. Could you give us an update on where we are at?
We had a very successful first day yesterday that was opened by the Honourable Prime Minister. We've had speakers from a number of other jurisdictions sharing their experiences with us, including one speaker who gave us a couple of speakers who gave us a global perspective. That forum has continued into today. I've missed this morning's session, and I'm hoping to get there very soon for the afternoon session, which will close off with me doing a summing up and then us moving to the next steps and next stages, which will be one-on-one consultation with, for example, opposition, political parties, the EBC, other interested groups, and then the drafting of policy and legislation to follow.
Minister Dillon, apart from the issue of crime yesterday, the issue of information related to the SSA and how it got into the hands of the Attorney General was also raised by the opposition. And there was, I guess, a subtle hint that it may have or could have come from you as well. And there was a concern that the Attorney General should not have been receipt of information about Dana Sitahal's accused, and questions about how he got that information to make a statement about it in the Parliament, and I think also at a UE forum. Can you clarify?
I'll allow the Minister and the Attorney General Office to answer that question.
Thank you very much, Minister Dillon. Yes, we have noted what has been said by the Leader of Opposition. To be honest, there's not much concern with it because the Attorney General, as he himself has said, is not in possession of any information he should not be in. He certainly did not receive any information from the Minister of National Security. I think the Attorney General's two comments, one in the Senate and then one at a forum earlier this week, are being taken out of context, not surprisingly, because it appears as though there's being a concerted attack being leveled against our Attorney General, who we have the highest levels of confidence in, and that comes from none other than the Leader of the Cabinet, the Honourable Prime Minister. But what the Attorney General said is he knows that intelligence-driven information, which may have been intercepted, has led led to charges being laid. That is not the provision of any information. That does not delve into or get into any infringement at any level whatsoever of the legislation, i.e. the Interception of Communications Act or the SSA. So once again, we see an opposition trying to distract a national conversation and trying to mislead the public. The Attorney General has infringed absolutely no law on either of those two occasions in what he has said. I can also tell you, he sits on the National Security Council. Constitutionally, our cabinet is the Prime Minister and the Attorney General. So when we sit on the National Security Council, Minister Dillon, the Attorney General, myself, the Prime Minister, and a couple other ministers, certain information may come to us, but this is not the information that the Attorney General has relied on. He said very, very at a surface level that interception is what has led to charges being laid.
Okay, just to add to that question, but do you think it was a judicial statement given the fact that the case is still before the court?
I think, put it in the context, the Attorney General was being asked by members of the public, including none other than, I believe, the former President of the Senate, Hamel Smith. He was being asked certain questions about what are the effects of the SSA and interception of communication. What he said in absolutely no way whatsoever will affect a fair trial. He did not get into any specifics. He just said he understands that there was interception used, and that interception presumably forms part of the cadre of evidence that is being used for prosecution. But he did not get into specifics. In fact, I think the attitude taken by the opposition of highlighting, trying to misrepresent, that goes more into the realm of potential defense mistrial issues. But no, I don't think it is an injudicious statement whatsoever.
The case against former Minister Fimbaganga collapsed before the courts yesterday. And once again, the question of the length of time that the judicial system takes has become the factor in this. And I mean, we see this, it's a perennial problem of cases meandering through the courts, and eventually it just collapsed with no real resolution of what may or may not have happened with respect to taxpayers' funds.
Absolutely.
Is this going to be the route that any further action that is being contemplated or being investigated will take? If we don't fix that part of it, it doesn't make sense bringing people before the court and then years later, nothing happens. It just, to me, it just makes the public very angry and lose confidence in the system.
Again, government's role in this instance is to try and unstick and unplug and unblock. As you know, with the separation of powers, the judiciary sits separately to the government. What I can tell you, we can't change the past, but this government has been working assiduously with the judiciary, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, the Criminal Bar Association, and other users of the judicial system on a criminal justice reform program that we're hoping within the very near future, as we roll it out, will begin to bear fruits. But what you've described is something we're very, very aware of and very alert to, and working along with the bodies who are charged with the responsibility, the judiciary, the DPP's department, to try and ensure this does not happen, because we certainly would not want this to become the norm or to be cemented going forward. So we are doing what we can. We've had a number of meetings. In fact, we have another one coming up soon. The Minister of National Security also sits with the Attorney General and myself on some of these discussions, and we are working along with the bodies who are constitutionally charged with the responsibility to get them working efficiently.
Question to the Minister of Public Administration and Information.
Yes, Ray.
What would have been Cabinet's discussions relative to the Prime Minister's recent visit to those three countries?
Well, you know, we don't discuss cabinet discussions at this press conference. We announce cabinet decisions. But Minister Young accompanied the Prime Minister to those on those visits, and he would be able to say some more about what transpired on the visit.
Well, as you would have heard, because we had a press conference. The Prime Minister had a press conference as soon as he came off the plane on what was a very long number of journeys and meetings. But I think the overall outcome was very successful. The discussions that I participated on with the Prime Minister were in the United Kingdom, Ghana, and then back again in the United Kingdom. And certainly on an international level, we are making waves, especially in the area of fighting corruption and anti-corruption. And the Prime Minister came out he was singled out by Prime Minister Cameron as being one of the leaders, certainly in our region and the smaller jurisdictions, and the steps that he's taking with respect to corruption. In Ghana, we had a number of very promising conversations, both on the energy front, the cultural front, sporting front, at very high levels with the Ghanaian government, as well as their gas company and their petrochemical company. The Prime Minister has told the population of very fruitful discussions he had with the IADB whilst in Washington. He had very good meetings with both Vice President Biden as well as the Secretary of State, John Kerry, and we're following up on those things. And if we can bring home a lot of what was discussed on this whirlwind tour, then Trinidad and Tobago will be in a good position in the coming few months.
Can I ask, now President Maduro is in charge of a country that is in virtual meltdown. Is there any benefit, real benefit, to having this one-day visit? And are we in danger of being, used by him to shore up his unpopular image at home? Is it for him a public relations thing, and we are just there on the receiving end? I mean, if you look at the international reports, Venezuela is in a mess, so why are we...
I think you need to give our Honourable Prime Minister a lot more credit than that. He's a very astute leader. Venezuela is one of our closest neighbors. The president of Venezuela, he's still the sitting president, has made a request of our government for meetings during the day, and we are facilitating those meetings. Certainly, as the gatekeepers of Trinidad and Tobago and as the government of Trinidad and Tobago charged with the management of the resources of Trinidad and Tobago, we are always very, very astute and aware of our need to protect the best interests of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And yes, I do expect some very fruitful discussions to take place on Monday, and for there to be exchange of information. As I say, Venezuela is our closest neighbor, and we recognize that.
Can you say, however, how much was actionable from that last visit? I believe it was last year with then Prime Minister Campbell Bissell. There were, I think, a number of requests for manufactured goods or raw materials, and it seemed as though it was helping them shore up deficiencies in their commodity availability, which of course has worsened over the last year. So is it that they're essentially coming cap in hand, and has there been no action or progress on what they asked for a year ago?
I am not sure what exactly it is they had asked for under the last administration, but we are open to conversation and discussions. As I say, they have requested this meeting with us, and the Prime Minister is going to lead a delegation to meet them and have discussions with them, to listen to them and hear what it is that they've come to us with.
But I also want to add and just remind that we had started a high-level discussion with Venezuela, and this, I believe, is a continuation of that discussion. You recall that there was a high-level visit from Ministry of Trade, Ministry of National Security, Ministry of Energy to Venezuela, dealing with respective areas. And this is a continuation of those discussions. So it's what is happening in Venezuela. Yes, we're fully aware of that, but that doesn't mean that the discussion should not continue, because we are still interested in energy matters, we're still interested in security matters, we're still interested in trade matters. So these are continuation of those issues.
Minister Dillon, can you just clarify, if I heard you on Morning Edition yesterday correctly, it sounded as though you were saying we are ready for any refugees that come, and I'm not sure if that meant that we are receptive to the idea. Can you say how would we deal with the different means of entry of any Venezuelan refugee, whether it be on sea by boat, if we're cracking down with scrutiny on tourist or visitor visas being granted, or any temporary stays being granted to Venezuelan visitors? How are we treating with anyone attempting to come in as a refugee?
Okay, what I said yesterday was, in fact, monitoring the situation in Venezuela, and worst case in that situation, if it happens to a situation where refugees start coming across Trinidad and Tobago, then we have to be prepared with them. Under international humanitarian law, one cannot turn back people who's coming into your country. If they come in and they claim as refugees, you have to be able to take care of them. So we'll have to build into that model that we have right now, using our disaster preparedness model, using our area of treating with emergencies, put that into practice. But in terms of the border, we're also going to have a presence, because we have to be able to bring people to our official ports of entry and not to our unofficial ports of entry. And that has to be done by policing our maritime borders as much as possible to treat it as eventuality. But as it stands now, Venezuelans can come to our official ports. There's no statement that says they cannot come through. There's no policy that says they cannot. They come through to our official ports, whether it's Cedros, whether it's in Chaguamas, or through the airports. They can't travel. And as it is right now, they can stay for 90 days. What we have to do, and what we are doing, is the monitoring in terms of whether they remain during that 90 days or whether they return to Venezuela. And that is being done through our immigration department now.
Is there anything specific, though, in our laws that allows you to apply for some kind of status as a refugee?
International humanitarian laws, you can apply for refugee status in any country in the world. Under the international humanitarian law, you can apply for refugee status. But it's up to the country, the receiving country, to grant that status.
You had told the acting Prime Minister last week that only 43 of these nationals had remained illegally in this country, and he felt that number was a bit low, and he had asked you to just double check.
That's right.
Is that still the figure?
That is still being checked by the Immigration Department. The figure that I gave the acting Prime Minister was that between January 2016 to now, I think it was up to the 11th of May, there were about 14,000 plus entrants from Venezuelans, and there was remaining 53. So that I, in fact, initiated a further instruction to the Immigration Department to really check those figures for me. And they're doing that right now. They're actually going through the data to confirm those figures.
Just one. Should we really be putting it out there that we are ready for refugees?
And I didn't say that we are ready for refugees. I said we are worst case the scenario, because we have to worst case. We have to predict and be prepared for it. We can't let something happen upon us and then try to act. What I'm saying is that we're monitoring the situation in Venezuela, and we have to worst case the scenario. In event something should happen, we have to be prepared to treat with it. I'm not advertising that we're waiting for refugees. That's not my intent. My intent was that we must worst case the scenario, because Venezuela is just about 7 miles at our closest point. All right, so we must be prepared as based on our geography. So I'm not advertising that but we have to be prepared. That was my message, quite frankly.
This is the Minister Young. Now, the Attorney General, I believe, yesterday gave an indication that he's going to be looking at this whole issue of child marriages and on a legislative point of view. Now, I observed that in the government's legislative agenda, you do speak to a marriage act, just straight marriage act, nothing qualifying it. Is that the mechanism which will be explored to deal with this issue? And is perhaps the government looking at a bipartisan approach with the opposition to pass legislation on this very sensitive issue?
This is an issue that has reared its head very recently. There was a release from the Office of the Prime Minister and the Minister whose portfolio this specifically falls under yesterday that sets out the government position. There are a number of pieces of legislation that need to be looked at, a number of specific acts. The Marriage Act is really but one of them. You have the Hindu Marriage Act, the Muslim Marriage Act, there's an Orisha Act as well. It is on the legislative agenda. It is being brought forward. It is something we are discussing, and something that the Attorney General had already asked the legal drafts people to start looking at, so that we would be in a state of preparedness to deal with it.
If I might just ask all yourself, Mr. Minister Young, and your two cabinet colleagues, if each of you as individuals have any view on this whole issue of child marriages, for or against.
This is the post-cabinet briefing, so we've come here as cabinet ministers, and as I said, the official position has been put out via the press statement.
But just yesterday, I think some religious leaders came out with strong condemnation of any attempts by the state to interfere in religious laws, practices, and so on. So how do you balance that if you're moving forward and making changes, but there's opposition from the religious?
you've used the right language. One of our government's responsibilities is to balance. On the other side, you've heard very, very strong views, both by religious leaders as well as by the wider society, with an outcry against these religious laws, if you want to call it that, but really laws of marriage. And what this really is a protection of children's rights, and also to make sure there's a consistency in the law, which is what we've said. Right now, there exists an inconsistency in the law. So government is always faced with decision-making and to do what government thinks is best for the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, and we will continue to fulfill that obligation.
Again, a question to the Minister of Public Administration and Information. Minister, could you give us an idea, for example, of what's happening with respect to appointments to the board of the Trinidad and Tobago Racing Authority? There's been some concern expressed in most recent quarters about, no appointments to that board.
I have heard the concerns. I hear the statements from the racing enthusiasts. That board falls under the Minister of Finance, and I will certainly pass on the interest in your question to him.
Also, what is government's position with respect to the operations of the 3 new state-of-the-art sporting facilities in central Trinidad? Of course, having to do with swimming, cycling, and tennis. And this one to Minister Dillon, I can ask. Minister, the question of the safety or the security of state witnesses in safe houses is a matter that has not met with full approval by some. What is being positioned in the context of enhancing or improving or strengthening those systems?
I'll let Mr. Dillon answer first.
The Justice Protection Program that's been run by the government of Trinidad and Tobago has been a very successful program. I mentioned in Parliament a couple of weeks ago that right now under that program we have roughly about 200 and something participants in that program. And to date, since that program has started, we have not lost an individual or witness. Right? Now, the Justice Protection Program is based, as you know, it's a volunteer program. One cannot coerce a witness, one cannot provide any incentive to a witness. And therefore, it is the witness who volunteers for the program. But there is a memorandum of understanding that one signs, because the state expends a substantial amount to ensure that that witness and their family and the dependents are protected as much as possible. So once that memorandum of understanding is signed, the state is obliged to protect you as much as possible. Now, there are other witnesses who have not signed the memorandum of understanding, and therefore they cannot be in the program. But it's, again, the state will reach out as much as possible to offer the witness that protection, because they are very important in terms of prosecution and so on. So the offer is made to protect the witness as much as possible. But it must be based on that agreement between the witness and the state by signing that memorandum of understanding.
On the issue of the stadia, I know the Minister of Sport is working assiduously on getting them ready, and you're free to contact him and get the details of the actual position as today's date.
Minister Young, can I just get you to clarify? You said the legislation on marriage is being brought forward. I think in one of our reports yesterday, we looked at its placement in the legislative agenda, and it seems, based on placement, that it's a couple of years down the road. Can you give a clearer timeline as to when you'd like to deal with that issue?
The first point is the legislative agenda is always speaking. That's the term we use in law. So for the first time, as the Attorney General has pointed out, in the last 6 years, we now have a written legislative agenda. It is within the government's remit to shuffle things as we see fit. So on this occasion, the Attorney General has indicated he wants it brought forward to be looked at. With regards to the specific time frame, no, I can't give you that. But what I can tell you is the Attorney General has brought it forward on the agenda, and it is being looked at.
And what would be the procedural preamble, if you will, to that, given the contentious nature of the issue? Are there going to be consultations on this with the religious groups? How will you proceed with getting that to Parliament?
Again, there is a minister, Child and Gender Affairs, out of the Office of the Prime Minister, who is specifically tasked with dealing with it. But in my conversations, I have been made aware that there has already been quite an extensive amount of consultation which has taken place within the past. So that is being borne in mind as to how we go forward. This is one of those topics where there are always going to be very strong views on both sides. So ultimately a decision will be made and legislation will be taken forward.
So isn't that the existing body of consultation does not necessitate fresh consultation?
I didn't say that. I said there's an existing body that is being looked at. And I guess once that is studied, then decisions will be taken as to how we go forward.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll see you next week.
I'd like to see you all down on the Hyatt covering the Campaign Finance Reform Forum. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you very much.